What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Recovery Couch for part 2 of my powerful conversation with Michael Thompson. Michael Thompson is the author of Search and Rescue, The Heart of a Warrior, and King Me. Michael also leads Zoe Ministries, creating life-changing experiences for men that combine solitude, community, and deep encounters with God. In this episode, we continue diving into the heart of recovery and masculinity. We talk about why guarding your heart matters, how intimacy with God is even more important than service to God, and why healing begins with telling our true stories. If you thought part 1 was powerful, you do not want to miss this. This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Whether you're buying or selling your home, Greg brings heart, hustle, and honesty to every deal. Call Greg at 937-477-8975 today.
Yeah, Brandon, Jesus says something really cool about, those who have been forgiven much, love much. And I think, when you're sharing that, I hear that in my spirit again. I hear, that's Jesus said, I came for the sick, and he's saying that to the Pharisees, and they're like, oh yeah, to the sick. They don't realize they're also sick, to heal the brokenhearted, and so, that self-righteousness, it's another, bless it, man, bless those of us, and I've had it, who've come across that way. It's another form of the disease. It's another form of the sickness. It's another way that, we hooked our wagon to this idea that somehow if we did enough and believed hard enough, God would accept us and love us more. So it's just a different version of brokenness. And it kept, Jesus is right in front of these guys, and they don't move towards him. They're hell-bent on getting him out of the story, so I think it's a different, and maybe, if it's the thing that keeps you away from Jesus, then brokenness isn't the problem, but self-righteousness is. If that's what we're learning from that story, and that illustration. But and I think we all, the recovery community, I've been with guys who are pretty religious in that space, and so much so that you almost, it's the only way. It's the only way, and they'll preach it, and so, you can turn anything into the religious order of things, and us and them, we and they. Church isn't the only ones who have some of that. Religions aren't the only ones. There's a lot of that. It gets funnier when you start looking at rivalries. Here at Duke and Carolina, it's we and they. Auburn and Alabama, it's we and they. People have criticized and said hurtful things, even just across the support of the local college teams. Crazy. But nonetheless, I think when you started, as I read through your book, and as you started to see hope, and the hope that you had getting on the bus, the hope that you had going to meetings, going to the Southbrook Men, putting yourself in environments that were good for you. There's no shortage of courage to do that. It's very, very courageous for us to do, all of us. And showing up and taking notes and processing that stuff and seeing that hope turn into something beneficial. Like, I'm seeing things that I didn't see before. I'm learning some new ways, not to cope, but to get free. And I'm finding some of the driving forces behind my addiction was, when my dad told me from 5 to 15, you're not going to be anything. You're a piece of crap. I should have expected that. You don't know what you're doing. You get enough of that, it's going to be prophetic. And will come true until a young heart that's now in this 20, 30, 40-year-old body is tended to and is told, buddy, that wasn't true. I don't know what your dad's story is, or your mom's, or whoever, who was heavy-handed and unkind. But that doesn't have to be your story, not anymore. But it takes it takes a transition, because this is all I've known. This is what formed me. This is the people that were supposed to take care of me. It takes quite a. It takes God. It takes quite a feat to see you be offered something else to believe, and then if you can get back to a place where you can choose to believe it rather than it's on auto, man, it's miraculous.
I couldn't agree with you more. I had this internal dialogue this morning. I went to the park and I'm moving around like I like to do. I get a lot. God just kind of shows up for me, especially when I'm out in creation and when I'm moving. And that was part of the discussion we were having. God and I this morning was, you either have like a kingdom mindset, or you have a winner's mindset or a loser's mindset, to make this an easy illustration. You're either positive or negative. It's one or the other. You can get more detailed and make it a lot more like muddy if you want, but you're either kingdom minded or you're not. And but let me, on that point, let me go back to something before we end our time here, because this is, I can't quit thinking about this. You said perspectives, attitude, beliefs are stored in the human heart. And as I'm saying this, I've thought all along, like, my actions are because of what I'm thinking. This whole concept of you have a winner's mindset or a loser's mindset, as I'm saying it, I'm like, I don't know if that's even true, because you're telling us that your perspectives, attitudes, and beliefs are stored in your heart. Mm-hmm. That one's new to me. And can you elaborate on that? Because that's really intrigued me since you mentioned it.
Yeah, when
more so than the mind, you're saying the heart is carrying all of that.
Yeah, I called it an organ of perception, organ of belief. So in the physical realm, we have this incredible system that works together, and if your mind, your thoughts, your brain, your lungs, brain's not going to stay cooking if you don't have oxygen, and then the blood's pumping. So all these things have a supporting and connecting role in keeping us physically moving. So spiritually, there's an anatomy as well, and there's just incredible. That's a whole other great conversation about the correlations between good and evil in our physical realm, because there's good and evil in the spiritual realm, and so when you start to look at heart, mind, body, and soul, love the Lord your God with all your whole being. And so each one of these things, you're definitely instructed, encouraged, and taught about having the mind of Christ. Your thought life matters. And yet, computer's a good example. We're both on them a little bit, right? My computer's not going to do anything there's not an application for Microsoft, something that it's in the hard drive. Right? Now I can do some creative things, but the tools to do those things need to be downloaded, need to be in this computer hard drive. And I get it. We got clouds now and stuff like that, but still, it's what's in there is what's been put in there. So that's what I mean. That's probably an easy illustration of, what kind of applications. And we know when your computer's not working, it's slow, something's going on, or what we're all concerned about. We've got protection on our computers, hopefully to some degree. We've got them on our houses. We've got them on our cars. To prevent viruses. I mean, it's $1 billion industry, the fraud industry in credit cards and banks, and it's crazy. to try to stay ahead of. So when somebody sends you an email that you don't know them, or somebody calls you on this and they're not in your contacts, most of us are not answering that stuff. Most. Why?
It's a package we didn't sign for.
We don't know who you are. We don't know. So go to voicemail, right? Or we slide it and send it and report it as junk. Didn't want it, So we monitor that stuff a lot more than we have monitored, kind of what's come into our hearts. And Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart. Romans says it's with the heart that you believe and are saved. I mean, and if you want to do it, I'll send you about a 30-page paper that I wrote called The Biblical Theology of the Heart that goes way into some of the technical realities of this. But, Old Testament scriptures say God has a heart. Here we are, image bearers. So it's just a fascinating subject. But back to your point, your question about, this soul, you can connect your soul to things. Things can connect to your soul that are good, and things that aren't. We call them soul ties. There's just a lot in that subject. Your spirit, we're spiritual beings. So, what we believe, that's faith. What and who we trust, that's faith. So there's just some real DNA to all this stuff, and moving in it. So the heart is this place where we store up. Scriptures give us plenty of references to believing in your heart. To Mary stored all these things up in her heart, and it's not a Hallmark card heart. This is something that the Scriptures, L-E-B in the Old Testament, cardio, where we get from the Greek. This is your heart, and this is again something that many have written about, and to understand that if you believe lies, and that is stored up in your heart, it's gonna be like that virus in your computer, in your machine. It may not hit every application or thing that you're working on day to day, but it's going to compromise the machine, and I think that we're far more than machines, but yet we have we're wonderfully made. And how does this stuff work together? And what's the ideal environment for us? And it's love. It's to be loved. It's to be seen. To be wanted. To be affirmed, to the level that it settles your heart. Like you said, you know who you are. Well, how do you know? Well, God told me. He's shown me how He sees me, who I am to Him. And I think that's when what you said earlier becomes even triple down powerful. Is these other opinions don't, they don't have the ability or the power to rule how I think, how I respond, how I react, because I'm being reworked, rewired in this restoration project that's me. There's a story, real quick. It's one of my most favorite stories about this. It's from this classic book and film called The Little Princess. Highly recommend it. And there's one scene, without getting way into the book, where there's a scene where this little girl who's World War I, she's in a private school, and reports come that her dad's missing. And so the headmistress is not a kind woman, and because the money, potentially now is not coming in for her tuition and stuff, she puts her up in the attic and makes her a servant. But it doesn't it doesn't affect the core of her. It's difficult. You know, she's now cleaning up after the girls that were her classmates, and this scene happens where all the girls now are going up into the attic to hear her tell the stories, to be with her. She's still anointed in many ways. Her circumstances aren't changing the attractiveness of who she is as a friend. And the headmistress finds everybody up there, scatters them all. She's going to deliver the venomous criticisms to Sarah. Sarah Crew is her name, and basically says, you know, do you still fancy yourself a princess? He, quote, good God, look around, girl. Look around. And there's that couple seconds of pause. The music is playing. They're in the attic. And she says, Sarah Cruz says, you know, because the headmistress says, do you hear what I'm saying? Do you understand? And then Sarah Cruz says, I do. I just don't believe it. And Sarah goes on and says, hey, all little girls are princesses. No matter if they're rich or they're poor, if they're bigger or they're small, all of us are princesses. Didn't your father ever tell you that?
Wow.
And you just go, and you can see the headmistress goes, it strikes that chord in her. Sarah's telling the truth. She says, you stay up here, and she steps out the door, slams the door to the attic, and then the camera goes close in to the headmistress, and a tear starts to come down. Sarah got to her. Didn't your father ever tell you that? Didn't he? And so this is what we're up to. This is what we're after, Brandon, you know, is trying to put people, you know, in the way, in the place where they can be encountering the love of God that could transform them. And would you believe it? And would you believe it?
Let me see, Michael, if I can't recap everything that you've captured through illustrations throughout this conversation and just a short recap.
Okay.
What we feed our heart, the fuel to our gas tank, to use the C.S. Lewis reference. If we're fueling it with loving perspectives, if we're fueling it with loving attitude, if we're fueling it with loving beliefs, if that's what we're storing in our heart, then our lungs and our brain will operate in a loving manner. And if we're operating from that perspective, then it doesn't matter if we're in addiction recovery with early childhood sexual trauma, or we've had so much guilt and shame from the stealing or robbing or using drugs. We can let go of other opinions, because what we fuel ourselves in our heart now is with, I'm a beloved son of God. And regardless of whether or not this woman comes up into my little attic and tells me I'm not a princess, I'm not going to believe it. Is that a good recap?
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, in like we've said, bro. You know, in theory, I think you're right on, and this conversation is in the right direction for sure. In practice, this is hard. This stuff is powerful that we're talking about.
This episode of The Recovery Couch is brought to you by J.B. Davis at Performance Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, ask for J.B. in Centerville and tell them The Recovery Couch sent you.
This is where the battle's fought. This is where the war is waged, is over the alliance, the allegiance, the affection of your heart. And some people have experienced God in places that have not been as even as loving as we're talking about. I mean, God's judgmental, God's mad, God's busy, God's, there's perspectives even in that have arrived somewhere in the timeline and been in the files of our hearts, even about God. So I had those. I had to turn in some subscriptions to God about God that weren't true, and let Him show and tell. Remember, show and tell me what is true. And so this is the journey and the process, I think, of recovering. I'm still in it. It has been and continues to be amazing to find brothers, friends, those who are also looking. It's the hopeful, even though they might be really hurting. But that's a miraculous and amazing thing to see in any space. A heart that's hoping for more, because something in them tells them that there's got to be more. And it's also a dangerous place to be, because if that discontentment leads to experimentation in places that the enemy, puts something in our way, it can delay. It can definitely delay and take us on a much longer route to this wholeheartedness and this settledness that we're after. Big everything. It matters. It all matters. It's big. It's big stuff.
Let me ask you this, Michael, just if you don't mind to be transparent with us, to help this conversation be practical for somebody listening. What are some of the ways that the enemy tries to lie to you? And then what do you do? What do you do? Like, what are your action steps when you start to want to believe those lies?
Yeah. I think the tricks are pretty ancient and old and effective. He's going to try to bring into question you. He's going to bring into question God, like he did in the garden. So there's versions of that are kind of at the highest level. I think the schemes of the kingdom of darkness. And so one of the places he seems to get a hold of men and women, I think, but I'm more attuned to the men's story, is in finances. Money is an important part of our life, our economy, our systems. And so when you have, more month than you have money, and you find something's going on in your job or industry, or they're downsizing. I mean, this is a place that I feel like the enemy thrives with fear and anxiety. So I've had challenges in that space. Making tuition payments for my kids. Taking out loans. We are a loaning culture now. Loans and credit and stuff like that. But the crazy thing is they want that money back. They expect you to be paid. They expect you
How
to be
dare
paid
they?
Back. I know. So that's a place I think that I've been. I can get attacked and 2 a.m, 3 a.m, panic. How are we going to get through this? I think those are some places that people would probably, like me, confess. It's not during the day. Sometimes we can just busy ourselves, but the harder times sometimes are the quieter times when you hear voices. I'd say this, Brandon, if you think every thought is your own and every voice in your head is you, then you're probably living in the smaller story. But if you understand how temptation works, how the enemy's voice, how shame, guilt, fear, how proving and providing for yourself, how all of that starts to work. And I think that's a big clue. If you can start to get up here and see this, your life and what's what's happening transactionally. This stuff is operating, with its whispers or its shouts all the time. So for finances was a big one, a place where I found I was easily a target of accusation, diminishment. I think, to be real candid, I think I had a season of, I think it was a spirit of dread, and I could get into that another time, but just, if anybody's felt that, I feel like I didn't even know where the ring was or when the bell was going to go off, but it didn't, it could be 2 p.m. or it could be 3 a.m. that I was wrestling with a spirit of dread that was after me, at me, and only, I'd have to get up and move. It's interesting. Instead of going and swinging at it, it's more like, you have to retreat to your corner with God and pray this off and pray this out. Worship was helpful in those times. Sometimes just music, something that could break in, and then inviting God, bringing the cross, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus against this spirit of dread. And it would, sometimes I'd fall asleep in the chair. Other times I would, be able to recover from the panic and the panic attacks that would come. And and then you got to go, job interview. You got to go, network. You still got to find, what do you need to do here to make the provision? And I found, God meeting me on the road. He didn't always bring the provision to me. There's a lot of times he brings his provision as I'm moving in faith towards something different than what I currently am experiencing. So those are, finances was a big one. My children, my family, my marriage, those are other ones that get tossed into the ring from time to time. Sometimes by a mistake I've made, my false self gets the moment. I say something that I'm embarrassed to have said, or I never should have said, and wouldn't have if I was in my right mind. but I know you're a dad. You understand how some of those moments get away. So how do you handle those moments, and how do you move, not just endure, hope that she forgets, or just wait till. I used to use humor to try to recover from those moments and try to, literally like tickle them, if not somehow be funny dad so that they might like me again. I mean, it's just, just ways that I needed to get some attention and care from God, so that, even humor can be used to deflect rather than, keep me from entering into a harder conversation that I actually hurt my wife or one of my kids by my words, or by my look, by the, we've heard all our lives. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So all that stuff, Brandon, is if you let me continue to confess, I got lots more. So
I'll stop you. No, but
thank you. Yeah, time out, man. So
I do want to thank you, Michael, because to humanize ourselves, I think is just a powerful way to show people like humility, and which is another way of showing God's love. So I'm very grateful for that part. And then to wrap this up, I know we're getting close to our time. Let's create an avatar for this last question. Like we'll call him Joe, and Joe's fresh out of prison. He's on probation, and he is about to join AA. And so he's at the this whole conversation has been advanced training. This guy's in basic training. And he's seeing where he wants to go. He wants a good job. He wants a loving wife. He wants, a family that forgives him, and the fact that he made mistakes. But when he sees his end goal, Joe is scared to death. How am I ever going to get there? I don't even know how I'm going to get to my probation appointment without a car. What do you say to this guy? Where does he start? Where does he go? What does he do?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's a great question. The hard part is I love a formula, or I love a recipe, and yet a lot of this stuff has some of the same ingredients, but it's not necessarily step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But getting himself in the environments are always going to be important, like critical, the environments you're in. So again, if Joe doesn't know anybody, I think that finding where those communities are that are committed to recovery, and all of those have versions of themselves. I'm not saying they're, some of them are more something and some of them are less something. Just in who's in charge of them, who's running them, and what that environment looks like. But I think that's a good bet to move at a place of recovery, celebrate recovery, AA, and be able to identify, connect with. There's some other pretty strong spaces regarding grief, because I think somebody who's been so hurt and had so much loss needs a circle that would give attention to grief. I think recovery communities do too, because there's a lot of loss there. So Grief Share is the name of a national environment that's in a lot of churches and spaces to meet with people who have lost loved ones, but have lost loss in life in general. It's not just death that we grieve.
This episode of The Recovery Couch is brought to you by True Story Media, where real stories find their voice. Whether it's podcasting, video production, or publishing powerful testimonies, True Story Media exists to help people share messages that matter. If you've got a story of transformation, faith, or recovery, True Story Media will help you tell it with excellence and impact. You can learn more about True Story Media at www.recoverycouch.com so you can start telling your true story today. Whoa, what an awesome conversation. I walked away from this conversation encouraged, inspired, and grateful for Michael's heart and his wisdom. In this episode, Michael Thompson shared profound insights on the journey of recovery and masculinity. He reminded us that the heart is the center of our beliefs and our perceptions. Michael and I explored how men can overcome fear and feelings of inadequacy, and why true healing begins with admitting our need for God and for other people. Michael spoke to us about the power of solitude to create profound encounters with God, and the importance of stepping into environments that are good for our hearts. Michael also reminded us that those who are forgiven much love much, and that living in God's truth allows our hearts to become powerful for good. In complete recap, we explored the power of intimacy with God, healing masculinity, and guarding our hearts to live in true freedom. I want to remind you guys to join the Recovery Couch Inner Circle on Patreon for bonus content, and stay tuned because my book, Step 4, A Journey Through Addiction, is coming soon. And remember, you always have a seat right here on the Recovery Couch.